Imagine walking into a crowded room, holding a heavy glass of water. At first, it is easy. Your arm is strong, your grip is firm, and the weight is barely noticeable. But as the minutes turn into hours, your muscles begin to burn. The glass starts to feel like a block of concrete. Your hand trembles, and water splashes over the edge. Everyone around you can see you are struggling. People are reaching out, offering to take the glass from your hand, offering to let you rest. But instead of handing it over, you tighten your grip, pull your arm back, and look them in the eyes, claiming that you are perfectly fine. Why do we do this? Why do some of us treat a helping hand not as a lifeline, but as a direct threat to our very identity? There is a silent epidemic of hyper-independence cutting through our modern world, and it is quietly destroying the people who seem to have it all together.
You probably know someone like this, or maybe you are this person. It is the colleague who works until past midnight rather than delegating a single slide. It is the friend who moves their entire apartment alone, carrying heavy sofas up 3 flights of stairs because they refuse to call anyone. It is the person who would rather get lost for hours in an unfamiliar city than stop and ask for directions.
To the outside world, this looks like ultimate strength, an admirable self-reliance. But if you look closely, underneath the armor of the self-made individual, you will find a deep, exhausting anxiety. Let us look at Mark. Mark is the kind of guy you see at the gym every single day at 5 in the morning. He wears heavy black headphones, his hood is pulled up, and his eyes are always locked straight ahead. He does not look around, he does not chat, and he certainly does not ask anyone to spot him on a heavy lift. If someone tries to strike up a conversation, Mark offers a polite but brief nod and immediately goes back to his program. He is a machine of discipline. Most people in his life write him off as slightly antisocial, maybe even a bit arrogant. They assume he trains alone because he thinks he is better than everyone else. But that is a lazy reading of a much deeper psychological reality. Mark is not avoiding people because he dislikes them.
He is avoiding them because depending on others feels like stepping onto a landmine. To understand why Mark is like this, we have to travel back in time, long before he ever stepped foot in a gym or started his own business. We have to look at how he learned to navigate the world.
As a young boy, Mark lived in a home where predictability was a luxury. His father was a man of broken promises, someone who would promise to show up to Mark's weekend games but would routinely forget, leaving a young boy waiting on the curb for hours. His mother was overwhelmed, dealing with her own silent struggles, unable to offer the emotional anchor Mark desperately needed. Early on, Mark's brain did some quick, survival-based math. It realized that depending on other people created a massive, painful risk. Every time he allowed himself to rely on someone else, he was met with disappointment, embarrassment, or neglect. So, he made a silent vow. A vow that many hyper-independent people make before they even have the vocabulary to explain it. He decided that the only consistent, reliable person in his entire universe was himself. If he did not build expectations around others, he could never be let down. If he did not ask for help, he would never have to experience the pain of someone telling him no, or worse, agreeing to help and then failing to show up.
This lesson did not stay in his childhood. It followed him into high school, where he hated group projects because his partners would always slack off, leaving him to do all the work anyway. It followed him into his adult relationships, where the moment a partner tried to take care of him, he felt a strange, suffocating panic.
And it absolutely followed him into his career. Now, at 32, Mark runs a boutique digital design agency. On paper, he is incredibly successful. He is the first one in the office and the last to leave. But behind the scenes, Mark is slowly drowning. The agency has taken on 3 major new clients, and the workload has tripled. His small team of designers is capable, but Mark cannot bring himself to hand over the creative control. Every time he tries to delegate a project, an intense wave of anxiety washes over him. His mind starts racing with worst-case scenarios. What if they mess up? What if they deliver it late? What if the client hates it and we lose everything? To quiet these thoughts, Mark does what he has always done. He pulls the work back onto his own desk. He decides to do it all himself. This is where the high internal locus of control, a trait psychologists often find in solo achievers, becomes a double-edged sword. Mark firmly believes that his outcomes are entirely determined by his own actions.
If he succeeds, it is because he worked harder. If he fails, it is because he did not do enough. On the surface, this sounds like the ultimate recipe for success. It builds elite consistency, but it also creates an invisible prison. Because when you believe you are solely responsible for everything in your life, you also believe that asking for help is a confession of personal failure.
To Mark, asking one of his designers to take over a client presentation is not just a smart business decision. It feels like admitting he is weak, incompetent, and unable to handle his own life. So, Mark pushes harder. He decides to optimize his life to a ridiculous degree to make up for the lack of hours in the day. He reads articles about how high performers sleep less and wake up fresh, attempting to hack his sleep down to 5 hours a night. He tries to force his brain into perfect, efficient sleep cycles, setting strict routines and ignoring the physical toll the stress is taking on his body. He tells himself that if he can just be disciplined enough, if he can just manage his time perfectly, he will not need anyone else's help. But you cannot out-optimize chronic burnout. The human body has limits, and Mark is rapidly approaching his. The cracks start to show on a Tuesday. The agency's biggest client, a tech startup that represents half of their annual revenue, moves up a massive project deadline by a full week. Mark's team is ready to step up, but instead of calling an emergency meeting and dividing the tasks, Mark locks his office door.
He tells his team he has everything under control, his voice steady, his face wearing a practiced mask of calm. But inside, his heart is hammering against his ribs. He has exactly 5 days to deliver a project that would normally take a team of 4 to 2 weeks to complete. That night, Mark sits alone in the office.
The glowing screen of his computer is the only light in the room. He has been working for 14 hours straight, and his brain is starting to fog. He stares at a complex design layout, but the shapes are blurring together. He is exhausted, his shoulders are incredibly tense, and a dull ache is spreading behind his eyes. He looks at his phone. He knows he could call Sarah, his senior designer. She is brilliant, loyal, and has been begging him for more responsibility. He knows she would answer, even at this hour, and happily take half the workload off his shoulders. He hovers his thumb over her name. All he has to do is press call. All he has to do is say, "I'm stuck, and I need your help." But as he stares at the screen, a physical sensation of dread rises in his throat. His chest tightens, making it hard to breathe. His brain, operating on years of survival conditioning, treats that call button like a self-destruct mechanism.
To call Sarah would mean exposing himself. It would mean letting someone see that he does not have it all together. It would mean giving up control and opening the door to unpredictability. What if she thinks less of him? What if she realizes he is struggling and loses respect for him? The hypervigilance, that low-level anxiety that Mark has carried since he was a little boy waiting on the curb, flares up with full force.
He puts the phone face down on the desk. He cannot do it. He would rather fail on his own terms than succeed by relying on someone else. He grabs a lukewarm cup of coffee, rubs his burning eyes, and forces his fingers back onto the keyboard. He will pull another all-nighter. He will force his way through this, just like he always has. But as the clock ticks past 3 a.m., Mark's hands begin to shake uncontrollably, and he realizes, with a sudden, terrifying clarity, that his body is about to make the choice for him. The shaking in Mark's hands is not just fatigue. It is his nervous system throwing a red flag. He stares at the cursor blinking on the screen, feeling like a tiny hammer striking his eyes. He tries to stand, to walk to the break room for another cup of coffee, but his knees feel hollow. He has to grip the edge of his desk just to stay upright. His heart is doing a strange, fluttering dance in his chest. In this quiet, empty office, surrounded by the cold blue light of his monitors, Mark realizes he has run out of road.
His perfect system of self-reliance has finally broken down. The next morning, the office is quiet when Sarah walks in at 8 o'clock. She expects to find the doors locked, but instead, the front lock is clicked open. She walks down the hallway, clutching her morning tea, and stops outside Mark's office. Inside, Mark is sitting on his small office sofa, his head buried in his hands.
The desk is cluttered with empty paper cups, crumpled notes, and his phone, which is face down. He looks up when the door creaks, and for the first time since Sarah has known him, the mask is completely gone. His eyes are bloodshot, his face is pale, and he looks incredibly small. Sarah does not ask questions. She simply sets her tea down, walks over to his desk, and picks up the printed project outline. She looks at the massive stack of unfinished design boards, then looks back at Mark. She tells him quietly but firmly that he is going home. She tells him that she and the team are taking the tech startup project, and that they are going to handle the midday client check-in. Mark opens his mouth to say he can still do the final review, but the words catch in his throat. The fear of letting go is still there, screaming in the back of his mind, but his body is too tired to fight. He nods, sinks his head back into his hands, and lets her take the files.
This is the moment of surrender that every hyper-independent person dreads, yet desperately needs. It is the realization that the wall we built to protect ourselves has eventually become our own prison. When Mark walks out of the office that morning, stepping into the bright, blinding sunlight, he is not just leaving work.
He is stepping into a strange, terrifying new psychological landscape. He goes home and sleeps for 12 hours straight. When he wakes up, his mind is clear enough to finally ask the question he has been avoiding for years. Why was it so hard to let Sarah help? Why did a simple act of collaboration feel like a life-or-death struggle? To understand this, we have to look at the cognitive architecture of the hyper-independent mind. Psychologists refer to this pattern as a high-autonomy orientation. It is a psychological makeup where a person feels a deep, almost instinctual need to direct their own life, relying strictly on their own effort to achieve outcomes. For people with this orientation, the world is divided into things they can control and things they cannot. Other people are the ultimate uncontrollable variable. When you depend on someone else, you invite their mood, their pace, their reliability, and their potential failures into your life. For someone like Mark, who grew up learning that external variables are dangerous and unpredictable, cutting out those variables is not just a preference.
It is a highly sophisticated emotional regulation strategy. This is why Mark trains alone at the gym and why he works alone at his desk. The gym is a perfect metaphor for his entire life. When he puts on his headphones, pulls up his hood, and lifts the iron, there is no negotiation.
The weight does not make excuses or cancel at the last minute. The relationship between his effort and the result is direct, honest, and entirely within his control. For years, this solo discipline served as his therapy. It was a predictable ritual that allowed him to decompress from the chaotic demands of his day. Science shows that repetitive, self-paced physical activity actually helps to calm our default mode network, allowing us to process emotions and think through complex problems without the distraction of social performance. But when we take that solo survival strategy and try to apply it to every single area of our lives, it begins to rot. In a team, in a relationship, or in a business, you cannot control every variable. When Mark tried to run his agency the same way he lifted weights, he created a system that could only survive if he never made a mistake, never got tired, and never got sick. He believed that asking for help was a sign of weakness, a public admission that he was not good enough.
He feared the social evaluation of his peers, dreading that if they saw him struggle, they would judge him. And this fear is grounded in biology. Studies show that when we feel we are being socially evaluated during stressful tasks, our brain triggers a massive spike in cortisol, the primary stress hormone. This elevation in cortisol actually impairs our cognitive function, narrows our focus, and reduces our ability to solve complex problems.
By trying to protect his reputation and maintain an image of perfect strength, Mark was actually making himself less capable. His hyper-independence was actively sabotaging his performance. It takes Mark several weeks to fully digest this breakthrough. He starts making small, deliberate changes. He begins by changing his physical routine. Instead of just grinding through heavy, solitary lifts that reinforce his need for rigid control, he decides to try something different. He picks up a jump rope. Skipping rope is a skill that requires precise, rhythmic coordination. If you tense up, if you try to force it with sheer muscle and willpower, the rope catches on your feet. You cannot bully a jump rope into working. It forces you to relax, to keep your arms close to your body, and to find a natural, flowing rhythm. For Mark, this becomes a physical lesson in letting go. He realizes that when he jumps rope, he has to be entirely present in the moment. The constant, rhythmic up and down movement helps to drain his physical tension, acting as a natural reset for his nervous system. He learns to focus on the sound of the rope hitting the floor, using that auditory cue to time his jumps.
It is a playful, creative outlet that does not allow for rigid, hypervigilant control. It teaches him a new kind of strength, not the rigid strength of an iron bar that snaps under pressure, but the springy, resilient lightness of an athlete who can adapt to the rhythm of the moment. He brings this new rhythm back to his office.
He starts with micro-delegation. He asks Sarah to take over a minor client email. When she delivers it perfectly, Mark's brain registers a new data point. The world did not fall apart. He was not let down. He tries it again, handing over a larger design layout. Each time he allows himself to depend on his team, he is slowly rewriting the survival script he wrote as a child. He is teaching his nervous system that collaboration does not equal danger. The true test comes a month later. The tech startup client is so impressed with the work Sarah and the team delivered during Mark's absence that they offer the agency an even larger contract. It is a massive win, but it is too big for their current team size. In the past, Mark's immediate reaction would have been to squeeze more hours out of himself, to try to hack his sleep even further, or to force his body to work through the night. But this time, he does something different. He calls a meeting. He sits down with his team, looks them in the eyes, and tells them the truth.
He admits that this new contract is too much for them to handle as they are currently structured, and that he cannot do this alone. He asks for their input on hiring 2 new designers, giving them a real voice in the company. Mark feels a brief, familiar flicker of anxiety in his chest.
But then, Sarah smiles. She tells him she already has a list of brilliant designers they should interview. The team immediately begins brainstorming, their energy light and collaborative. Mark looks around the room and feels a strange sensation. It is not the rush of adrenaline he usually feels when he forces his way through a crisis. It is something much better. It is peace. He realizes that by opening the door to others, he has not lost control. He has actually built something much stronger and more resilient than he ever could have created on his own. The journey of overcoming hyper-independence is not about becoming dependent on others or losing your drive. It is about realizing that true strength is not the ability to carry a heavy glass of water forever without trembling. True strength is having the courage to set the glass down when your arm begins to ache, and allowing someone else to help you carry it. It is understanding that we are wired for connection.
When we finally put down our armor and let people in, we discover that a helping hand is not a threat to our identity. It is the very thing that makes us human.
If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to Mind in Minutes for more psychology stories like this. Thank you for watching.